All right, Profit Podcast listeners, we have a special guest on the show today. Welcome, Kelly. So happy to have you.
Hi, so happy to be here.
Yeah, this is super fun. So I have been a fan of yours for a long time. I've heard, online marketing made easy, smart passive income. You've been on some really big shows and you've shared so many different messages about confidence and strategy. I was actually watching a video that you did on your own show, the Kelly Roach show, about investing. And I was like, oh my gosh, like this was so good. So I know that you cover so many different pieces of, building confidence or helping people with their businesses. But can you just tell us a little bit about you and what your journey's been like?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a business growth strategist. And so I help people find the fastest, most efficient way to achieve their business growth goals. Wife and mom, I've been with my husband for 18 years. I have a 10-year-old daughter. We homeschool her together. This is our first year of doing that, which has been the greatest blessing ever of our lives. It's been so incredible, such a great experience. And I started my first company in 2012. I took that business to 8 figures. I built 5 other companies. Now I run a portfolio in the online space. And, each of my companies has a different value proposition and focus and, clientele and all of those things. But everything that we're focused on is how do we help people build a faith and family first business so that they can achieve their goals and dreams while keeping what belongs first. That's really the crux of it. And each of my companies play a different role in helping people to make their dreams come true.
Oh, I love this so much. And I love the family first piece of it because, and that was actually when your team reached out to me about being on the show. And that was part of the topics, it was like all these different strategies and pieces that we could talk about. And whenever it said family first businesses, I was like, oh, that's something that we've covered everything on the show. And we've never really talked about, from entrepreneur to entrepreneur, what that looks like. So can you just kind of tell us, like, where does that come from for you? And why is that important to you to have that in your own business, but show others how and why that's possible?
Yeah. So I'll talk about it from 2 perspectives. Why it's important to me, because I think family is the most important thing in life, right? So there's only one place that we're irreplaceable, and that's at home with our family. So, that's really every decision that I've made, in my life. Even my husband and I, when we were dating before we got married, before we had my daughter, we knew that we were never going to put her in daycare. We knew that one of us was going to be home full time. We didn't know which one of us that was going to be. We were both working corporate jobs at the time. And then, when I fell in love with what I started doing in my own business and knew I wanted to continue with that, it just made sense that he was home full time. So we've had him home full time since she was born, which has been just incredible. It's given us so much spaciousness and freedom as a family, and just a really calm, happy, peaceful, stress-free home environment. So I think, just there's not a lot of people in the position that I'm in from a business perspective, advocating for prioritizing your family and the decisions that you make about your family at the top of your list. And, I look at, something you do on the show is helping people to keep creating and to keep building without burnout. And I think that comes from understanding what your true priorities are in your life, and then understanding how to allocate your time based on your value system, and then making sure that your life is by design and that your business is built to serve that. And that's what I've spent my whole career doing. I couldn't do that the way I would have chosen to do that when I worked in a Fortune 500. And so when I started my business, that was a huge priority, that I was going to design my business and design my life in this way for myself, but then also be able to teach other people. And, for me, I started having my daughter in my launches from a very young age. I bring her on TV appearances with me. She comes to my events. Now she's homeschooling. She sits on my coaching calls. So she is just growing explosively in so many ways. But the reason why I do that, not just for her, but for my clients, is that the majority of my clients are female leaders that want to be disruptors and change makers, innovators, visionaries. And I think that they don't have a lot of examples of women that are all in moms and also building an empire of like how to bring those two things together. So I try to strive in everything that I do to really create an example and create a space for leaders to keep what's first with their faith and with their families, and see that that is not in conflict in terms of building a really successful business. And in fact, the better your home life is, the easier it is to build a successful business. I will die on that hill. I just know it to be true. The more calm your home life is, the happier and more rich and fulfilling your home life is, the easier it is to perform in a business sense. So I know that was kind of a long answer to your question, but I think it's an important dialogue that isn't really being had right now, which is why I'm trying to get out and share this message. You know, I see the divorce rates. I see the substance abuse. I see the people that build successful businesses just to feel like they lost everything in the process because they don't have a relationship with their spouse, their kids, you know, whatever the case. And so if we want to change that, we have to talk about it, you know?
Yeah, 100%. And we have a motto around here. It's like we're building our content around our lifestyle and not the other way around. Like we're not trying to compromise, you know, like you got to be on Instagram 24/7 or we have to be, you know, recording something even when you're like, it's like, no. Like, I mean, if that's works for you, awesome, more power to you. But that doesn't work for me. You know, I have 3 kids and it's crazy. It's always bananas around here. Kelly and I were talking, you know, right before we started recording. I was like, there was almost a blizzard in Houston. Like, what in the world? How does that happen? And then the kids are home. And then I'm like, okay, you take a step back and you reassess your priorities and say, okay, what's the most important thing that I need to do, you know, for my business, but also for my family. And you can do those simultaneously. So I love that you've kind of put the stake in the ground of like, I'm going to be this example to my communities and show them what's possible, because I don't think that we have enough of that, enough of people living out loud and in front of everyone of this is how I'm doing what I'm doing behind the scenes. I'm going to bring it out in front and actually show you and tell you and not keep it so secretive. So I love that about what you're doing and the work that you have. So I want to talk about your podcast because we are obsessed with podcasts around here. We're obsessed with origin stories. We just love the idea. So tell us a little bit, how long have you had your podcast? Tell us the name of it and the audience that you serve there.
Yeah. So it's called The Kelly Roach Show. And I think I'm 7 years in now. I have not missed a week of recording since I started. We have, I think, 1,100 and some shows published so far. And yeah, I mean, it's been a huge part of building my brand. I teach business, but on the show, not only do I teach business strategy, mindset, spiritual growth, family life, really bringing the whole thing together. Like, how do you create a 1% business and a 1% life? And yeah, it's been an awesome experience. And it's how a lot of my clients find me and then end up, you know, wanting to work with me. So podcasting has been a huge part of building my brand online for sure.
Okay, well, I can tell you that somebody was just listening to this and they said, what? She's never missed a week in 7 years. So can you talk about what is that like? Because this is something I get asked all the time from people. They're like, but how do you keep showing up? Like, you know, we can say, oh, I'm going to commit to consistency, or I'm going to do this no matter what. And I'm going to keep serving my audience. But can you share with us if you have any stories of like, oh my gosh, I had to record in this really obnoxious place, or I had to do something on the go? Like, what's something that's happened with your journey, like just over the years that has, you know, almost taken you to the point of like, oh, we weren't going to be able to make it, but this is how we were able to show up. Do you have any strategies to share?
Yeah. I mean, that happens all the time. I mean, like it's almost like hard to pick a certain time because I feel like that's all the time, right? Yeah. I mean, I think that anything that you commit to doing over a long period of time, there's going to be seasons where you feel super excited and super motivated and super connected to what you're doing. And then there's seasons where you're literally like fitting it in just under production time. Last week. I missed a recording day. I had 2 launches already this year. It's been absolutely, completely bonkers. I started homeschooling my daughter a couple months ago. Things have been crazy. My team's like, we need an episode for Monday. And literally I was like, at my kitchen counter, like 10 minutes before the deadline, like getting a new episode. That happens, right? And I think the bottom line is, it really is about service. And I think that, when I say about a faith and family first business, I think each of us were given really unique gifts. And our goal is to take responsibility for stewarding those gifts. And stewarding those gifts is about being of service. It's about giving. It's about sharing. It's about showing up, right? And so there's going to be some days where you're super excited because you have a message to share. You're super excited because you have something that you want to talk to the audience about. But there's also going to be days where you show up because you understand that that is the responsibility that comes with the gifts that you are here to steward, and having faith and trusting that by you showing up, you're role modeling for someone else to show up in their life and to show up in their business, or, whatever that looks like for them, whatever realm you help people in. So I think what I would say is that it's recognizing that it's bigger than you, and recognizing that it's not always about you. And, champions always say, like, you don't operate on emotions based on how you're feeling. You operate based on the goals that require certain behaviors that coincide with them. And I think the degree to which you can be really, really clear on where you're going in your life, where you're going on your business, and what kind of behaviors align with that, like, it makes decision-making really easy. Right? I want to be one of the top 1% podcasters in the world. And that doesn't mean showing up sometimes. That means showing up consistently all the time, which is why I have not missed a week. And I don't intend to, because I think that's part of becoming the person that your dreams require, is having that relentless pursuit of excellence in everything that you do, even when you don't feel like it. Right?
Oh, yeah, that's fantastic. I mean, that's mic drop, right? Like that's just a message that we just talk about all the time here on the show. It's like making that commitment to keep showing up, no matter what's happening in your life or in your journey. And the reason why is because we can always tailor it to what's going on in our life or that season of life in what we're doing. So I want to ask you a follow-up question to that, because I know that there's someone listening. Maybe they haven't started their podcast yet. Maybe they've been listening to this show and they're like, okay, Crystal, I think that this is going to be 2025 is going to be my year. I'm going to launch my show this year. And they're listening to you and they're like, oh my gosh, you just said 1,100. Like, how do you keep coming up with ideas? I know that that's their question, because people come to me and they say, I'm afraid I'm going to run out of ideas. And I've been doing this for so long. I'm like, oh, but you won't. Like, you have so many things to keep talking about. So do you have a strategy that you and your team follow, or what do you do to keep motivated year after year to keep showing up for your podcast?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, I think there's a natural evolution that happens as you're in business. You're always having conversations with people. So there's always new topics all the time that spark an idea. And I think it's just having a process. I know this is going to sound so simple. It's just literally having a process where you write down the ideas. Literally, that's it. Because if you're building a brand online, if you're serving customers, if you're engaging with your audience, new topics come up constantly. And there's always an evolution in what you're doing and how you're doing it. So there's always something new to share. So you'll never run out of ideas. Maybe you're disorganized, so you can't put your finger on the idea. You can't remember the idea because you didn't write it down. But that's just a matter of just having a system, keeping a Google Doc or keeping a spreadsheet or whatever the case, and having lots of choices when you sit down to record to say, oh, this is something I really feel energized around that I want to share about today.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, like, I love the simplicity. Like, I have a Google sheet that's still, like, I've been doing this forever. That's where everything lives. And it's like, oh, okay, something comes up, or I find a great link to something. Even if I don't have a fully formed idea, I just found something that's interesting. I'm like, I take that link, throw it in there, and then we'll revisit that again in the future when it comes down to it. But you said something earlier about, having your coaching business, like, and using your podcast to really have that top of funnel, or have that ability for your potential customers or clients to get to know you. And I know that there's a lot of coaches in our audience that would love to hear kind of behind the scenes. Like, what do you do? Do you strategically talk about your coaching, or do you have, like, let's say sales promotions specific times of year? Because I think that they get overwhelmed with, well, I don't want to be salesy in every
Mhm.
single one of my episodes. And I want to talk about my coaching or how I'm helping people, but they haven't really found that great balance. So I would just love to hear your perspective, because I listened to you had this specific episode, and we'll link to it. It was a 15-minute
Mhm.
episode about investing, and you're just talking about the things that you plan on investing in 2025 and what that looks like for you. And I didn't feel like, oh my gosh, Kelly's selling to me this whole time, I have to shut this off. Like that's never happened. But
Yeah.
I'm just curious, is that intentional for you and your team? And what does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to be really cognizant of, brand building is actually more valuable than selling is, right? And
Mhm.
selling is necessary in order to transact a deal and like get it done. So selling is essential. Selling is very, very important. But brand building is actually more important than selling, because selling is transacting with one person, whereas brand building allows you to transact with hundreds, if not thousands of people. So for me, when I think about the podcast, it's brand first, selling second, because my podcast is very focused on adding value and really building a relationship with the listener where they are naturally moving through the know, like, trust process because they're getting so much value. They're gaining an understanding of how I help people. They can see clearly the demonstrated expertise. I don't have a set regimen that I follow on every single episode where it's like every episode has a promo or every episode is selling or anything like that. I do kind of operate in seasons. So if I'm getting ready for a big launch, you'll see that for 5 episodes in a row, I'm going to promote that workshop. And then once it's open cart, those episodes are going to mention that product that's open, right? But if I'm just in an open season, like right now I'm in a nurture season, I might say, oh, like one of the episodes that I think released maybe even today. I didn't check what released today, but I think even the episode that released today, I gave, a 4-step process. I walked you through the process. I'm like, this is how it can work for you. This is what we do. This is how you can do it. And here's how, you can get free training on how to do it. Come register for a free workshop that I'm having. So I think you can do it on an episode by episode basis. And I don't think you have to be this like super aggressive, like regimented process. I think the more organic it feels, the better. But I think you should have like a plan. Right.
Yeah.
So whether it's you're moving people from the podcast to your email list, you're moving people from the podcast to book a consultation, you're moving them into workshops, you're moving them into a specific low ticket offer, and then you're going to upsell them to the high ticket. And it doesn't need to be the same all the time. It's just like, what's the strategy? Like, generally speaking, what's the strategy? And I think doing what feels authentic and what feels good for you is really important. Typically, shows of my size have a lot of sponsors. I have 0 sponsors. I do not want in a 15 or 20-minute episode 6 commercials. That is like my nightmare. I wouldn't listen to that. I wouldn't enjoy that. And so I don't put that on my show. Right. So I think it has to be really specific and organic to the creator, and it has to feel really good for you. And I think also there's an element of testing and trying different things until you see what kind of lands. Right.
Yeah, and I love the analogy of brand building and selling, because that really, I think that what happens, and so we're talking to all of you that's trying to start a podcast right now and believing that you have to start it and immediately start selling everything.
Yeah.
You're going to end up alienating a lot of people. And
Yeah.
so what Kelly said about the brand building piece, and I love what you said about the seasons, right?
Yeah.
It's like you're going to have seasons of selling,
Yep.
but it's likely not going to be every single episode that
Right.
you put out for all,
Right.
the entire lifetime of your podcast. But at the same time, those intentional pieces really, I believe, help sustain you through
Yeah.
your content journey, because then you're like, all right, we're going to be laser focused
Yeah.
on this one promotion.
Yeah.
And then I had this fun idea or this great person that I met at a conference and I really want to interview them. And
Yeah.
it's just going to be fun and lighthearted. And I know my audience would love behind the scenes. Like, there can be a dance between all that blended pieces of content and make
Yeah.
it work. But back to Kelly's point, you just have to have a strategy. You
Yeah.
have to have a strategy. So I'm so curious, do you, at the stage that you're in your journey, do you still come up with all of your ideas on your own? Do you have a team that they kind of source some ideas and then say, hey, here's some options you can choose from? Like, what does that look like for you on the production side of it?
Yeah, I mostly just do my own. I'm very intuitive in my process, and I'm also very in tune with the market. So like most of the time, what I'm creating for a reason, if that makes sense. Like it's usually because there's conversations or energy or feedback that I'm getting a loop on that I'm like, this is where I need to show up for people right now. So I would say 98% of the time, I just do that solo. I don't even talk to my team, and I'm just like, here, this is what the episodes are, get them loaded. But every once in a while, I will go to them and I'll just say, hey, what, and I do this with my different companies, and I'll say, hey, I want to record an episode that you think will be really good for our clients in this program. Like, what's a topic that would be really meaningful for them right now? Or if there's a team that's in a launch, I'll say, hey, what are you hearing from a lot of the leads in the launch? What's a topic that you feel like would really help that they need to hear? So sometimes I'll go to them and say, like, what are you hearing from the market, or what are you feeling you could really use extra support on to share with people?
Okay. Yeah. I think that's helpful, is just to know that across the board, it's going to be different for everybody. But thank you so much for sharing, how it is for you, because I'm the same when it comes to like that. It's almost like it has to be sticky. It's like I have to have some origination, even if I get some ideas from. It's like it has to be sticky in order for it to be that authentic voice and come out. Because I've tried, like, oh, let me throw something into AI and see, and then I would spit something out, and I'm like, oh no, this is garbage.
Yeah,
this is something that I wouldn't be proud of.
And that's when I think people really have a hard time sustaining the show. When you no longer have like the personal connection to what you're doing, and you don't feel personally invested in what you're creating, that's when you just feel like you're going through the motions and it feels like a chore. Versus when there's a reason why you're recording each episode that you're recording, and there's a purpose, and you want to help someone because you saw a need. That's a completely different energy going into a recording session. And so, I think just staying connected to what you're doing is really important. And if you need inspiration, I do something about once every other month. I'll do a post on Facebook, and I'll just say, hey, I'm getting ready to do a big recording block for the show. Send me all your requests. And I'll get like tons of requests from people. And I'll just read through them, and I'll feel the ones that like, okay, yes, I think this would really make a difference for people. And I'll go off of that. And I'll say, if you recommend a show, I'll give you a shout out in the episode, which people love. So that's another fun way to kind of get your audience involved.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I think that is like anytime, like if I hear my name in someone else's podcast, I'm always like, oh my gosh, like, it's such a silly thing, but it's for like, we get so excited. We turn giddy like little kids.
No, it is.
Like, oh my gosh, like the teacher said our name, or they called on us.
Yeah.
And I think
people love
great.
that. People love that. Yeah.
Well, I want to ask you another question about your show, because I know that you're an author. You've published multiple books. So do you use your podcast to kind of naturally bring it in? Like, is it even one of those where you're like, oh, I hadn't planned on talking about this, but we covered this whole thing, this section of what you were discussing in our book. How does that work for you?
All the time. Yeah. So if I decide I want to talk about a topic and then I realize that I cover the topic in one of my books, then I'll like physically, oh, that's so funny.
We're getting a real time.
This literally happened the other day, and I was like, I'm going to pull out the book. And so then what I'll do is I'll teach whatever I planned on teaching on the show, and then throughout the show I'll refer them back to Amazon or Audible or whatever the case to go and get the book. Also, I just did a relaunch of one of my books. I recorded the audiobook version of it. So I did a whole series on the podcast leading up to that and inviting people to get that. So a lot of people move from the podcast over to the audiobook, which that's a great correlation as well. If you're an author and you have a book that you haven't done an audiobook for, I really strongly recommend relaunching the book with the audio version and then leading people from the podcast to the audiobook, because if you think about it, those are already your audio listeners.
Yes.
They already prefer the headphones. So that's an easy way to get that deeper dive, into more people's hands.
Okay, I love this so much, and that's so good. I've done one audiobook. How did you like that experience versus doing a podcast? How was that
Oh,
for
I
you?
loved it. Actually, it's so interesting. One of the biggest pieces of feedback that I got from all the people that purchased my audiobook was that it was fun to listen to. They said it
Oh,
sounded
that's
like a
great.
podcast instead of a boring, like narrator that it's like chalk on the chalkboard, nails on the chalkboard, just like so boring. You can't even listen. And I got that comment from so many people. And I think that's why podcasters are the perfect people to record audiobooks because they're fun behind the microphone. They're used to
Yes.
speaking in an animated way. Whereas normally when an author goes and records or you hire someone to record a book, it's like this very monotonous, boring, hard to listen to audio that doesn't give people the experience of what you really want the tone of your book to be.
Oh my gosh, like that's such a great point, and it's so true. Like if I'm going to get a book and I
Yeah.
see like there was a someone else read it, like I'm immediately not as excited. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
"Oh,
Mm-hmm.
like I'm sure it's still going to be great, but
Yeah.
is it going to be as great as the
Yes.
author reading it themselves?" So that's such a great point. So everybody that if you've released a book, take Kelly's advice, go back and do the
Absolutely.
audiobook. Like get
Yeah.
that going. But I want to ask you about coaching. So coaching in 2025, like I said, I think we have a lot of coaches in our audience, and I just want to know personally, like I serve kind of one to many. I don't do a lot of one-on-one coaching, and I'm just curious about just the space in general, what you see in 2025, like what is the landscape of coaching and how does that look and what are some of the things that you and your team are thinking about whenever it comes to how you're going to show up online and in your business?
Yeah. So we do large scale high ticket coaching. One of my companies, the business advisory, is specifically high ticket coaching and consulting. So that's all that they do. And so what I would say is this, the coaching market in and of itself has moved into the next phase of market maturity, which means that buyers are typically not novice new buyers anymore. Most of the people are going to be people that are more discerning buyers that have already bought multiple products in the online space. And so they have a very clear picture of what they want and what they expect in a relationship for coaching. And so, when we look at 2025, it's going to be a very relationship based sale. So
Mm.
all those things that everyone just pushed everyone for an entire year to start using AI in their coaching business, the worst thing you could possibly do right now, and I know I'll get heat for that, it's the worst thing you could do because people are really only investing in brands where they meet all three criteria. They like the person. They believe that they're a good person that actually has like values and integrity and expertise and all of those things. They want to have an ongoing relationship with the brand. They actually like the brand, what the brand stands for, who they are in the market, how they show up and engage with the world, the type of content that they put out and the solution. And they believe that the solution is superior and it can not only fit in the amount of time that they have, but within the budget that they have to give them the result that they want. And, this was not the case a couple years ago. A couple years ago, when people were buying coaching, they were like, oh, this person teaches that thing that I want. I'm going to invest in that thing because they wanted the result. They didn't have the experience that people have today where they've bought so many things where the business owner was MIA. There was no support in the program. They didn't deliver on what they said that they were going to deliver on, but they were too new to know that. They didn't know to ask the right questions. Well, now people do know to ask the right questions. They have higher standards. They have higher expectations. So, when you look at 2025, I say it's the year of live launching, live streaming, and live shopping. And the reason I say that is we're in a trust recession. And the most important thing that you could possibly do to build trust with your market is to show up and engage with them in a more raw, real, and unscripted way versus just a 30-second reel or a story or these edited pictures. All of those things are great. I'm not saying they don't play a role. I use all marketing, but I think it's really going to be a year where relationships reign. And I think really thinking about that is going to be super crucial for anyone that wants to have success in selling high ticket coaching.
Yeah, and I love that it's just basically live, like the aspect
Yeah.
of having something live. And when you say live streaming, are you talking about live streaming just to sell, talking about live stream coaching, like
All
webinars?
of
Like
it.
what exactly do you
All of
mean?
it.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
you could be teaching, you could demo a live coaching situation, you could be doing a master class, you could be doing a webinar, you could be, doing an interview with someone, like we could be doing this on social media. It's any long form content that gives someone the opportunity to actually spend time with you and your brand to work through
Yeah.
the know, like, trust, buy process.
Yeah. Yeah. I love
Yeah.
that. I love that. And I think that, you just kind of sparked something for me. Actually, I'm like, oh, I like this idea because there was a point, especially when a lot of the streaming platforms were coming online. It's like, I think the market was flooded with people trying to figure out streaming and what does this mean? I mean, just the logistics of it. Like,
Yeah.
how does this work? What buttons do I press? And how do I let people in to join me and all of those? How do I talk to my audience? I want to put the comment on the screen. It's like, it's so funny. I remember back, I don't know, Kelly, if you remember like the days of Periscope, before Facebook Live was even a thing.
Yeah.
Like I remember trying to figure this out. And so back to your point earlier about continuing to evolve and grow in your journey and keep trying new things and keep exploring what's working in the market. And I think for me personally, it's what makes having an online business so fun. It's because it is changing. I think that really bothers a lot of people, but and the content that we create around here is about content. And we're like, man, we just never run out of ideas to talk about and things to do. So, so we talked about, coaching, we talked about what you're doing in your business. Is there anything else that you're really excited about in 2025 that you're looking ahead and you're already like, I can't wait to be at December 31st of this year and kind of debriefing and thinking about all the things that maybe you and your team have accomplished or the things that you're working on right now?
I would not so much as from the standpoint of an accomplishment for me, but I would say I think that there is a huge resurgence of leaders around the world that are rediscovering their faith. And I'm really trying to share that message in the market, number one. Number two, just from our first few launches of the year, as well as our clients, we're definitely seeing that momentum is picking up huge with live launching. So I'm really excited to see a lot of business owners like fall back in love with their businesses again and have fun and make money this year. So for me, it's not so much that I have like a specific accomplishment that I'm excited to do, but I'm hopeful and excited for business owners this year to really lean into what matters most. And I want to help them to fall back in love with their businesses, grow exponentially, have fun, put what goes first. And I'm just all in on trying to get that message out right now.
Well, I think that this is the reason why you are the perfect guest to have on the show, because those are all the principles and values that we teach around here, because showing up in that exact way is what we're trying to accomplish. So this is, I can't wait. I can't wait to see what you're going to be doing in your business this year and what everybody listening is going to be doing. But Kelly, we have some rapid fire questions that we like to ask all of our guests. I did not warn you about these beforehand.
It's okay.
But these will be fun. And I think that you'll add a lot of value to them. So are you ready?
I am ready.
Okay. So what is what piece of advice would you give to a brand new podcaster or content creator?
Focus on sharing your gifts every single day. Behind the microphone every single day. Be behind the microphone every single day.
I love that. Okay, the next one is a 2-part question. And it's, what is the dream podcast you would love to be on? And who is your dream podcast guest you would love to interview?
Ooh, a dream podcast I would like to be on. Well, I will say this. I do 20-minute podcast episodes. Like, I'm a down and dirty, get to it kind of gal. I don't need like these extended conversations. And Joe Rogan does 3-hour shows. So I have to say, I think it would be very interesting to see where a 3-hour conversation would go. Cause like I'm done after 20 minutes. So I'm very curious of like, what would happen? Where would this go? Like, so I would say that would be a great show, for that purpose to really get into some crazy conversations very
Yes.
unexpectedly. You never know where that show is going to go. It's kind of nuts.
Yes.
Dream podcast guest. I don't know. I mean, I wish that I would have interviewed my grandparents, to be honest, before they passed. So, I mean, I think if I could have anyone, it would probably be my grandfather, because they had just an incredible life story, and they were my inspirations. They were my role models, as far as marriage and the grandparents that they were, and everything I learned about giving and being of service and life and so many things. So I would say my granddad.
Oh, I love that. I love that so much.
Mhm.
And that's so special.
Mhm.
And then my last question is, do you consider yourself a perfectionist?
No.
I love that.
I am so much more focused on imperfect. I think all of my success has come from imperfect action.
Mhm.
So there's probably some areas that I could live a little bit more of the perfectionist life in, you know what I'm saying? But being in imperfect action has served me well so far in my life.
Oh, I love that so much. And I love how matter of fact you answered that. It was just no. And I think that it's so good because we get a lot of people that are like, oh, like, Crystal, why'd you ask this question? It's like either they are or they're like, oh, I'm a recovering perfectionist.
Yeah.
And so I love that, just matter of fact, no.
No.
And I think that, it's the reason why you're able to keep showing up time after time. So I hope that everybody that's listening to this and, walks away from our conversation is just keep showing up and keep sharing your journey.
Yeah.
Do you have anything else you'd like to share? Where can everyone follow up with you and learn more about all the incredible things that you and your businesses are doing in 2025?
Yeah. I mean, if you have a goal of growing your business exponentially in 2025, come listen to the Kelly Roach Show. It's 20 minutes. Literally, it's like just getting like a shot in the arm to give you that fuel to hit it hard and make big things happen in your business and in your life. So the Kelly Roach Show is the best place to go. And of course, you can follow me on Instagram, Kelly Roach Official. Send me a DM and just say, hey, heard you on the show. And I'd love to connect with you.
Yes, please. Actually, wherever you're listening to the podcast, take a screenshot, tag myself, tag Kelly. Let us know, like, what was your number one takeaway? We would love it. And go listen to Kelly's podcast because, like I said, I was surprised when I got on there. I was looking through. I was like, oh, I want to listen to, this is just part of my, guest research. I'm like, I want to see like what she's been up to and what she's been doing. And then I was like, oh, investments. She's talking about investment. I want to listen to this. Like, what's Kelly have to share? So absolutely go check out her podcast. Kelly, thank you so much for being on the show today. This was so much fun.
Thank you for having me.